Hi, Tammy here, and we are now in part 4 of the series, How to Be a Change Leader. So in part 4, we're going to cover two things: mobilizing change networks and best practice communication for change. I'm really excited because change management and change networks are so critical. And my clients implement change networks, and we do it many different ways based on the culture. But ultimately, you need a group of people that are excited about the change, that are part of the departments that people look up to and respect, and that can really be great leaders, knowing the system, knowing the new processes, and getting them involved in testing and all the wonderful things that come from being a knowledge expert for the change and influencing folks in a positive way. So that's what this is about. And then how do you execute change communications, and when should you do it? What are the best times? So some of the best practices on how to do that. I hope you enjoy, and again, always want your feedback. Thanks. Next, this is one of my favorite topics too, is change networks. So as a change leader, you can either participate in a change network, you can assign someone on your team, or you can mobilize a change network yourself for an initiative that you're leading. I speak about several aspects of change networks. Here, we're going to talk about initiative-based change networks. Those are the ones that are formed to support specifically an initiative or a few initiatives. We're not going to talk about enterprise-wide strategic networks, highly strategic networks. That is a different type of change network, how it functions. But we will talk about what you can do as a change leader and what you can control. They play many roles and have so many benefits. They communicate changes to their teams. They represent the department needs and their concerns to you, so you're aware of those. They help solve problems, which is amazing. I've seen so many amazing things happen. They are influencers also, big influencers. And when you launch something, they end up being your first level support at Go Live, because they've been involved for so long. They understand what's going on, and they can help people, and they know the answers. This is another way to engage and enable culture carriers to inspire hope, just like your coalition. It is possible, absolutely, to unleash the power of a change network, depending on how you manage it. It's made up of individuals that represent various parts of the business that will be affected by the change. Their value is in their interpersonal skills when you create the right environment for this to thrive. We talk about differentiators. This is one right here. They're a trusted source of communications based on who they are and how you manage them. They will get and provide honest feedback about changes and employees and where the employees are in their departments on the change curve, how they're moving through it, if they're getting stuck as a group. They have access to the real implications of the proposed changes that you're working on. Lots of people on project teams and leaders have ideas of how change is going to impact people, but it's your change network who really have the ground truth on what changes will impact what people and how. And a lot of times, change happens on that project to adjust the outcome because of the change network and their feedback. And that is some really powerful stuff. So let's talk about our accelerators. How do you start this? What do you do? And as a change leader, how do you differentiate yourself to make it better? So recruitment is huge. Selection criteria is critical. You really want them to be a subject matter expert in their function. You want them to have a positive attitude. You want them to be a good communicator if possible. You want them to be able to influence. And you want them to be able to collaborate. The selection level that you want is actually varied. You want high rank and low rank. You want it all to be rankless, if you will. If you get too high, nothing gets accomplished. If you get and build too low, nothing changes consistently. It's all kind of haphazard. So I've seen all of that happen. So you don't want that. So you want to recruit up and down the ranks. One way to engage your coalition is to engage them in the recruitment process. So you want them to identify some people to be part of it And everybody wants to be part of a change so that they know what's going on and they understand how it's affecting them. And when they have someone on the change network, they know that's an in and they're going to have that information that they need. So a lot of people will volunteer this. You want to be sure to recruit across departments that will be impacted. You don't want representation from just one group. It's really important to get diversity here. You must tell your change network when you recruit what's in it for them if they volunteer. Will they be seen as an expert? Does this make their resume more attractive? Does it help them to grow? Incentives like certifications, awards, skill building, opportunities to share their new knowledge publicly, those are all things that work to entice people and draw them in. Others may join simply because someone asked them to. You can ask folks yourself. You can also ask your coalition, we talked about earlier, to volunteer people. That works as well. Leverage as much as you can to build trust with your coalition, and this is one great way to do that. The kickoff meeting, another very, very important event. Share the benefits case for the strategy you built and all the reasons why changes are important, why they're urgent, and why they're good for the organization, and share what's in it for them. Very important. Also share how it benefits them to be part of this group and this network, how the changes are going to benefit the organization, how the changes are going to benefit people, including them, and how the change network is going to benefit them in participation. Those are all three critical components to share. Set expectations. Things like they'll participate in all the change the change network meetings. That's a big one. That can be a problem sometimes. Additionally, you always want to participate in the meetings with them. That's another differentiator. You want to be there and you want to be visible and in front of them. Keep this group really close. Make sure that you create psychological safety for them to be honest and to be transparent about what's happening out there on the ground, because that is going to let you and help you to be more successful with your initiative. Training and regular communication cadence. So people want to know ahead of time what's coming down the pike. The network should know ahead always of what's coming down the pike, and they can surface and help resolve possible issues before it gets out to the larger groups. That is a very, very powerful thing that helps. Create a safe place for feedback, we talked about, and that psychological safety. Make it okay to surface challenges. Make it okay to learn together. When you make it okay and you make it psychologically safe, you'll get so much from this group. Center for Creative Leadership did a study, and they learned what made change leaders successful and what made people in that role not so successful. Leaders actually said they did or didn't do these certain things. Leaders who weren't successful said they failed to listen enough to questions and concerns and address them. Make sure you are vested in this team and in this group. Make sure they get trained. Make sure they understand the change curve. Make sure they understand what you expect of them. They will be such a powerful group if you manage them really well. This is differentiator. Okay, so let's go to the next concept of leading change. Best practice communication strategies. So as a change leader, you may find yourself in one of a few roles. You might be leading a change initiative. You might be supporting on a team that's on a change initiative. You might be affected as a leader by the change or as an employee by the change. You might even be making changes just on your team so that you as coming in and making some changes. There are responsibilities with communication that we take seriously. Each of these roles, though, require good communication skills with slightly different communication responsibilities. Since there are many aspects of communication, let's focus now on some guiding principles, regardless of your role, and then we can wrap up with best practice strategies that anyone can use. So we plan to communicate early and often and all the way throughout the end. It's easy to wait too long, and it's easy to stop communicating when you get far down the path, beginning to end. And if you're not in the beginning, you got to ask yourself, why am I not started on this yet? Select credible leaders to deliver messaging. This is really important. How they deliver the message is also a differentiator. Live in-person events or virtual events is always super important, where they can see you and watch your body language. I was working with a client who decided they were going to do global webinars, which was what we wanted. That was really important for people to be in front, the leader, the executive in front of the people. And it was a global company and they had a global audience. So they had different time zones they were managing. And they made two decisions that had huge unintended consequences. First, they were so concerned about what they were going to say. And this is so important. That's a valid concern, because what you say and how you say it is very important, especially when you run a very large organization, Fortune 100 or whatever, media, etc. So you have to be careful what you say and how you say it. But they were so worried about they were going to say the wrong thing. They fully scripted the entire webinar every month, and they actually stood and they read the teleprompter all the way down. And it was so obvious that they were reading. It came across as they weren't sincere or authentic or cared. Now, I knew these folks. They cared so much, and they were so passionate about the people. But unfortunately, what's translated over the camera is that it wasn't authentic, that they didn't care, and that they weren't worried about what was the changes we're doing to people. So the authenticity was a miss, and unfortunately trust eroded and there were consequences. Second, while they wanted to take questions, they weren't comfortable taking questions because they were afraid to answer ambiguous questions. Very common, and it is a scary place to be, is to answer questions that are ambiguous and you don't have the answers to yet. So what happened was they decided not to take questions. Another trust challenge that they ran into. And remember, trust erodes over time and from the actions or inactions of people and leaders. So just be careful with that. As best you can, be authentic and transparent. And when you're talking to people, even if it's over a camera like this, or if it's in front of people live, really think about how it's coming across, because you might have the best intent, but your impact is what really matters in times of change. So one of the things I do, and I work with leaders, is when you communicate, rehearse your spiel. Get practice anticipating and answering ambiguous questions. Don't be pressured into making up answers when you don't have them, but think about how you'll articulate how you will articulate when you get an ambiguous question that you are not sure how to answer, and anticipate those. Leading through ambiguity is part of the change journey and an important leadership competency anyway. So you can really hone that. Next, create a cascade down and feedback loop and we're going to talk more about that a little bit later when we get into 360 feedback. Communicate wins early. This is really, really important. If people can see the positive outcome of the changes you're proposing, because you're saying it's going to be great, but people really don't know for a while. But if you can communicate great things early, positive outcomes, maybe some tests that you've run, in this agile world and environment that we live in, and agile methodology, you're able to do sprints and things like that. If there's anything positive that you can share, that would be great. Even creating a change network is exciting stuff, and that's a win, and people feel good about that because they know that they're going to be heard through that network. So that way, that will help with the important psychological aspect of the emotional change curve continuum that we talked about. Okay, so communication. And the last thing I will say about this is always remember, people will make up information. It's human nature. The worst possible stories to fill in the gaps that you don't give them and fill for them. It's true. So communicate early, communicate often, and authentically.